I think this is you guys see this? We're agreeing. I think this is definitely a good idea.
Welcome to On Deadline, the Washington Examiner's political game show. I'm Tiana Lowe-Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytalk.
Each week, we discuss the top stories and give our opinions on the biggest of them. And you get to vote with whom you agree. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. This week, we begin above the fold. Christian, what's the top story you're following?
Well, February 28th, 2025 will go down as a day that lives in infamy. I'm, of course, talking about the end of Donald Trump's honeymoon period in the White House. Now, let's be honest, that dust-up with Volodymyr Zelensky, both parties were at fault here. There's no way Big Z shouldn't have gone into the Oval Office and shown total deference to the president. That being said, Donald Trump himself is the one who cut the meeting short and declined to sign that deal. In kicking the Ukrainians out, he's losing out on two major trophies to brag about during his Tuesday night address to Congress. The first, the aforementioned minerals deal, which would have been good for virtually all of Ukraine's natural resources and a major offset on the negative impacts of his tariff agenda. That being said, the second one is maybe even more impactful. It's this narrative of Donald Trump, the peacemaker. While all this was breaking down, the ceasefire agreement in Gaza was also falling by the wayside. Look, Donald Trump is right. In every good deal, neither side gets exactly what they want. But if you're the negotiator and you blow up those talks, you get to go away with absolutely nothing and the baggage that goes along with it.
I think it's pretty clear that this was not, as a lot of the liberal media has liked to spin it as, it was not a premeditated ambush, right? They had the flags and the pens and the lunch all ready to have a celebration of this deal made. Trump and his team was ready for it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was Zelensky who probably started the fracas for a couple of things that were not necessarily within his control. There was a huge cultural chasm, right? And his choice not to use a translator was probably a mistake, because in Ukrainian, he probably didn't think of anything wrong saying JD. But the vice president correctly addressed him as Mr. President, right? But then he didn't do the Macron-Trudeau come bend the knee. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't say, yes, Mr. Trump, thank you, Mr. Trump, thank you, Mr. President, you're so great, Mar-a-Lago's the best, yada, yada, yada. It's not that difficult. Trump is a pretty simple person to figure out. So ultimately, I do think there's a reason why you see people who support the Ukrainian cause mad at Zelensky, because he undermined his own cause. Where you are, I totally agree with you, is that it's not a good thing for Trump either, because it made getting that negotiated settlement to end this war much more difficult, right? Because you've shown that Ukraine is not united with the U.S. The only one good thing that could come out of this in terms of longer-term strategy for the U.S. is you saw Keir Starmer and King Charles, full court press, getting a bunch of other European leaders going to the UK to meet with Zelensky as a show of support. King Charles hosting Zelensky at his personal home, which he almost never does. And is this a sign that they're going to heed Emmanuel Macron's call for the rest of NATO to actually start doing what Donald Trump has been demanding for a decade now, which is pay your fair share? Officially, these countries are supposed to be spending 2% equivalent of their GDP on defense spending. The goal in the long run is to have it be 3%. Right now, the only countries that are actually doing 3%, US, Poland, and obviously Ukraine, which is spending somewhere like 37%. And the only countries north of 2% are UK, France, and Denmark. So could this be a moment where it's actually forcing Europe to do, in the long run, what Donald Trump wants?
Yeah, perhaps. Here's the problem with that argument, though, Tiana, and you are right. 2% of the NATO members' GDP is supposed to go to defense of the continent and the United States, because we are also a member party. But here's the problem. The UK, France, Germany, all these countries that are talking about carrying out a peacekeeping operation in Ukraine after the war ends, they're not going to be able to do it without the United States. Now, the Europeans want actual U.S. boots on the ground and equipment, material, personnel supplemental packages coming from Washington. But now that this minerals deal is broken down, they're going to lose the U.S. economic backstop as well, because the Trump administration, they were virtually arguing, well, there's no way Putin will break the ceasefire agreement and relaunch an invasion if there are U.S. civilians working on production end for these natural resources coming to the United States. That's just as good as U.S.
Because that actually would
troops.
trigger Article 5,
It would. And here's the other thing. If Europe goes about and bumps up their defense commitments, that's great. They should be doing this as, signees on the NATO charter. That being said, Donald Trump is still going to lose out on it, because he might say, oh yeah, 5D, 6D, galaxy level chess, I got them to do what they wanted, but no one's going to give him credit for ending the frickin' war in the first place, right? I mean, this is, in my mind, the biggest unforced error, really the only unforced error that Donald Trump has made during his second term in the White House. It's been amazing the way he has stuck to the strategy outlined by his advisors, not only in geopolitical politics, but in promoting his own domestic agenda as well. And it looks like he is a person who has habitually been ruled by his emotions. He let those emotions get the best of him and lose sight of the goal at the end of the tunnel. I'm not so sure they can move forward with this process. And if you look at what's happening at the White House, we just got news about this Monday morning. Donald Trump is meeting with Mike Waltz, NSA, and Marco Rubio to talk about refocusing their attention away from the European continent and strengthening alliances with countries in Latin America. That's a total 180 from the policy that they were putting out the week before. I just don't know what he's doing.
It's a 180, and also, if you're talking about countries capable of contributing to defense, the Latin American countries, GDP per capita, they're punching nowhere close to Europe. And obviously it's the US and everyone else, but they're still tiers below that.
So Tiana, I want to know what you're thinking about heading into this week.
A quarter century after the World Health Organization officially declared that the United States had eliminated the measles, measles is back with a vengeance. Now there has been the first death of an American from the disease in 10 years. This outbreak at press time is 150 people strong across 9 states, but it seems to be exploding. Why? Because of a lack of measles vaccinations. Measles does not involve slowing the spread, social distancing, mask wearing, none of that. All you need to do is get vaccinated. If you get your one vaccine with infants between 12 and 15 months, and then your second kindergarten shots, as we used to call them, you're 97% protected from measles. Instead, what you want is herd immunity. And you know who's finally conceding this? At long last, RFK Jr., our new HHS secretary, who used to pretend that the measles vaccine caused autism, which it does not. He heeds everyone that vaccines not only protect individual children from measles, but also contribute to community immunity, protecting those who are unable to be vaccinated due to medical reasons. The number one reason someone cannot get vaccinated? Because they are a baby younger than 1 year old. That is who you're protecting. It's why you're seeing most of the measles hospitalizations are all children under 5 and babies.
Tiana, you know what's interesting to me about this story is obviously we have our own personal history with RFK Jr. If you can't guess, we're not super huge fans of his. But the HHS press secretary announced on Friday that they were going to be leaving their post. I think he had been in there for like 2 weeks. He was installed just after RFK was confirmed. And now this op-ed comes out from Kennedy. So do you think this is like a sincere change in views, or is he just saying the things that will potentially save his job? Or, are we going to have a new HHS nominee here sooner than later?
I'm hoping that it is a mandate from not just up on high, but also from the Senate, right? Remember Bill Cassidy, in order to vote him out of committee and then vote for his nomination. Bill Cassidy, who is a physician that sees patients with, I believe, liver diseases and needs for liver transplants. So sees people that need vaccines for this immunity. He said, if you try to be too cute with especially the MMR vaccine, none of this is to mention COVID vaccine, which really is a personal choice because it doesn't reduce that transmission. Measles is very different. That's the whole point of these vaccines, to prevent you from getting it and to prevent the transmission. And so it's possible that after his initial remark that he said the measles outbreak, I think it was on Wednesday during that all-hands cabinet meeting. He said it's not unusual. But as we've seen, it is unusual. It's the first death in 10 years. It's the first death of a child from measles in 20. And it's been 25 years that we've officially had this disease eliminated in the United States, thanks to just, again, this is not COVID where there are lots of difficult trade-offs that had to be made. And in an odd way, him initially trying to say, oh, vitamin A might help minimize how bad the measles cases are, because we know there are no known antivirals that actually reduce the severity of the disease. And it does put a significant portion of the kids who get it, especially in the hospital. I think it's a quarter of all children who get it will wind up in the hospital. Focusing on these therapeutics and NPIs reminds me very much of what the Biden admin did with COVID.
Right.
When they entered office with the vaccines that Donald Trump created, and instead of just focusing on if you get the vaccine, it will prevent you from getting so sick that you'll be hospitalized. Instead, they first had to push the lie that it would prevent transmission, which it didn't. And then they said the vaccines aren't actually good enough. You still have to wear a mask, and you have to get Paxlovid, and you have to social distance.
And you have to get 3 or 4 more vaccines down the line.
Exactly. And so it's I'm hoping this was a mandate from Trump. I'm hoping this was a response to pressure from senators like Bill Cassidy, because this should not be political. And it just baffles the mind that it has been coded as such, because this is not COVID. The MMR vaccine, I'm pretty sure our parents got it when they were children. It is safe, and we know that it reduced in 3 years measles cases in the US by 97%. That is how successful it is.
Up next, it's time for Yays and Nays, a segment where we both get to vote on the other big news in politics this week.
Trump's plan to replace the EB-5 visa with the $5 million gold card is a good idea.
I think this is you guys see this? We're agreeing. I think this is definitely a good idea, first and foremost, because everyone knows the immigration system is broken. Sure, a lot of people in the Trump White House want to get rid of all legal migration, but this is a good way to, one, and I'm not going to steal your thunder because I think I might know where you're going with this, but this is a good way to reform the laws we have on the books without throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? The EB-5 visa system essentially allows foreign nationals to pay $1 million, come to the United States as long as they launch a business that creates, I think, 10 jobs within a calendar year. Seems pretty straightforward. We're bumping up the barrier to entry right here. It makes perfect sense to me, and we're trying to promote job growth. I see this as a win, and I see it as like a thing for Donald Trump to go fully in on and bridge the two wings of the immigration caucus amongst Republicans, while doing it in a way which, like, Democrats can't really say, oh, this is inhumane. No, we're just selectively shrinking the pool and boosting our economy by doing so, right?
Yes, and it really does fit, actually, with Trump's view of, like, macroeconomic trade. If you are going to pursue more protectionism, and you also want to maintain a strong dollar, which we know that's Donald Trump, if he wants to balance two things, it's basically the William McKinley agenda. Tariffs, while still bolstering the strong dollar to prevent that inflation. Part of what you want is you want to bring in more capital and more investors. It's a good hedge, and it hurts China a lot if you can do it. Of course, the stipulations stand that they have to vet these applicants. It's not just going to be like, you $5 million, you're good. They will check to make sure that the other countries, they're sending their best, you know? But also, this is probably the first big proposal I've seen from this administration that is significantly deficit reducing. Donald Trump famously does not want to touch entitlements, which, as we discuss all the time, are the real long-term driver of our debt issue, especially the fact that right now interest payments on the national debt are the second largest line item in the federal budget. So how do you reduce that? DOGE, while, again, I've been supportive of a lot of things that DOGE has done, shuttering USAID is not about deficit reduction. It's about making sure that we aren't funding Hamas terrorists and gender transitions in Guatemala. This is actually deficit reducing. It does not take that many people. Think about it. So at $5 million a pop, if you give this to 200,000 people, and believe me, the appetite will be there.
It's a couple $2 billion right there.
There you go. You're cutting a massive amount that could be there. And I think even don't keep it at my only correction to this would be shoot for the stars. I think you could go more expensive.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do want to sort of hammer home one point that you addressed, the criticism of this plan upon the initial announcement from Trump last week, is that, oh, this opens up the door to criminals, Russian oligarchs, whoever. We already have this system, right? They're just raising the price tag. You think the Russian oligarchs who are going to pay $5 million weren't trying to do it for $1 million?
Or come through the southern border under Joe Biden, which we know was happening.
Exactly.
It was all Russians and Iranians in the end.
Exactly. You won't hear me say it all the time, but this is a good, smart development from the Trump White House.
Now it's time to fill in the blank.
The DeSantis' endgame is blank.
While I'm scrambling to think of my word, I'm going to fill you guys in what we're talking about. The Florida gubernatorial race, 2026, seems like a long ways away, but we've already got declared candidates right now. Congressman Byron Donalds has been endorsed by Donald Trump, but there is sort of a sentiment on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, that Casey DeSantis, First Lady of Florida, should replace her husband when he terms out in 2026. I have no idea what to make of this story.
I mean, I get that they think their end game is governor's mansion again, but their actual end game in terms of long-term political viability, thinking more than just 2 years out, is Attorney General of the United States, right?
For Ron or Casey?
For Ron. I mean, it's one of those where, like, that would have been, like, the dream draft pick for this time around. But, one, we know that Trump's first cabinet picks tend to not stay the whole time. Let Pam Bondi be at the vanguard. And two, Florida doesn't want to give up DeSantis just yet, right? He is term limited. He's done in 26. If he became Trump's AG, closing out, cleaning out DOJ, getting everything done so we don't have any more Russiagate funny business, election, whatever they think's going on, get it all done. That gives DeSantis a very nice perch to run to replace Trump, because Trump is term limited. And no, he will not be eligible for a third term despite, like, the right-wing fever dream.
I think, look, I have two words that come to mind. One's a word, one's a phrase, and they're actually kind of two sides of the same coin. The DeSantises are pursuing irrelevance with this because it's obviously going to put them in direct conflict with Donald Trump, who, again, has endorsed Donalds. But I also think they're kind of hedging their bets, right, to a degree. I think the reason that Ron DeSantis ran for president back in 2024 is because he believes Donald Trump is unfit for office. He thinks this thing won't end out well, and there's going to be an opportunity for someone who stood up to Trump a little bit on the sidelines. You know, maybe he's not doing what Janet Mills is doing and saying, I'm not going to follow the executive orders that you're passing, but by backing a different candidate, he does put a little bit of distance between himself and MAGA. That being said, would it undercut his potential chances of becoming AG if he pisses off the big guy again? I don't know. I don't really understand why Ron DeSantis makes a lot of the political choices he makes. Perhaps he's not as skilled of a political operator or maneuverer as we thought he was.
There's never been, like, I'm trying to think of a divide between a politician in terms of how they govern and how they campaign and strategize. And DeSantis, it's like night and day.
And there's a lot of time between now and 2026. Not to mention 2028, and let's not forget, Donald Trump holds a grudge, but he is willing to forgive. Just look at DeSantis' fellow Floridian, Marco Rubio, who used to call Donald Trump a con man, but is now Secretary of State. Anyway, let's turn it up a little bit. We're ending, per usual, with Last Laugh. And on Sunday night, the Oscars had everyone laughing. I'm just kidding, I didn't watch. I don't really know what happened. I know Nora won Best Picture and Director and Actress. It was pretty good. I don't know if it was Best Picture worthy, though.
I mean, the Oscars, like, they love their movies about prostitutes and sex workers.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
like, it was funny. They started off with the only one of the two movies that got nominated that everyone watched, Wicked. Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo, like, repaying us all for how annoying the Wicked press tour was with truly phenomenal performances.
Yeah.
And then it was a bunch of stuff about movies that most of America did not watch. Like, I know you and I watched them because we're, like, annoying Beltway journalists.
Can't help ourselves.
But, like, I don't blame other people for just completely tuning it out.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the best part was, let's see, Christian, how many years are we from Time's Up and Me Too and we care about all these things?
I want to say 2017, 2018 maybe, right?
Okay, so it did not take a full decade for the Oscars to have a round of applause for Georgina Chapman, Harvey Weinstein's ex-wife, that swears she didn't know anything. Speaking of liberal elite Hollywood pedophiles, Jeffrey Epstein back in the news.
He's back, baby. Sort of, right?
The Epstein files were released?
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. I mean, Pam Bondi makes this big announcement last week, who, again, speaking of someone who might not be Donald Trump's AG for too much longer,
We'll see.
but they basically told the world, we're giving everybody Jeff Epstein's black book. You're going to see Bill Clinton in there, Bill Gates, George Soros. I'm pulling names out of a hat right now. Obviously, because that release turned out to be just a big nothing burger, right?
I'm trying to think of how they could have botched it, like,
More than they did,
egregiously.
yeah.
For one thing, if the topic is child rape, probably don't use it to, like, take photos outside of,
Oh my
like, the White
God,
House going,
yeah.
look at me with my rape binder. This is, Mitt Romney warned us all, binders full of women.
Oh, that's no good. I think my favorite part of that story, though, actually is the Libs of TikTok woman, whose name I actually don't know, but let's talk about how she was so critical of the Biden administration for bringing in all of these influencers and social media stars as propaganda props.
Please, Joe, please, 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 please use your immunity now to do whatever you can to make sure that this selfish, narcissist, lying traitor never becomes a dictator.
Harry Sisson's just sad that it's not him.
I mean, for sure, because his business model is drying up. Although TikTok might be saved, who knows? But let's just remind folks at home, let the first person without sin be the one to cast the first stone, right?
Or tweet the first dunk or
Oh,
whatever.
God, yeah.
Okay.
Do a little dance,
Yes.
something, I don't know.
Oh no, the Trump dance, right? Yeah?
We're back.
Yeah. Let us know who you think is more cringe or who you think won this week's clash. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. We will see you next week. I'm Tiana Lowe Desher.
And I'm Christian Daytalk.
And this has been On Deadline.